Hi, everyone. Welcome to library again. We will continue on with Lions and Liars. And we left off on chapter 7 with Frederick Fredrickson dangling from the bell after he had just climbed the rope a little late, but he had finished it, he had completed it, and now he's dangling. And he's seeing everybody below him. And the rope slipped out of his hands, and he's hurtling toward the ground. So, chapter 8. Ding-a-ling. Frederick was on his back, his eyes squeezed shut. His hands burned, his arms ached, his heart, which had just been clang-a-langing like a bell, was now thunk-a-lunking like a peg-legged pirate tumbling down a flight of stairs. Through his haze of panic and pain, Frederick became aware of a heaviness filling his chest, threatening to overflow like a dam. His eyes stung, and he realized with horror that he was about to cry. His eyelids snapped open. Nosebleed, Specs, and the professor, Antbite, and Benjamin were all leaning over him, blocking out the sky. When they saw he was conscious, they let out their breath. "We thought you were dead," Nosebleed said. "Don't move a muscle," Benjamin began. Frederick ignored them and scrambled to his feet. He pushed between Benjamin and Nosebleed and started walking as fast as he could through the groups of campers and around the climbing frame. He walked this way and then changed direction and walked that way. Frederick was power walking, his arms pumping like pistons and his legs speedboating him around and around the yard. He wove in and out between the other boys, aware of them giving him strange looks and jumping out of the way so he wouldn't brush against them. Frederick knew he looked stupid, but he didn't care because as long as he kept moving, the tears wouldn't catch up. 0900 hours, Eric shouted into the megaphone as he strode through the boys. Swimming rotation. I want you changed and Riverside in 5. He dodged out of the way as Frederick sped by him. Quit playing around, Dash, he said. Then he gave 2 short blasts on his whistle. The boys broke up, heading toward their cabins, several of them leaping sideways as Frederick motored past them. He made it back to Group 13, where the boys and Benjamin were waiting for him. Frederick stopped in the middle of the group, leaning over and putting his hands on his knees. The heavy, about to spill over feeling in his chest had eased. He had outrun the tears. "Okay," Frederick said, and let out a whoosh of air through his mouth. "Okay, I'm all right. That was—" Benjamin trailed off and shook his head. "That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen." "You look like you had bees chasing you," Nosebleed said. "Why'd you try to hang on to the bell?" Specs asked. "He didn't mean to hang on to the bell," the professor said to Specs. "He accidentally let go of the rope." "Well, why'd you let go of the rope?" Specs demanded. "Accident." Ant, Ant Bite sounded out each syllable loudly for Specs. Specs shoved the younger boy's arm. Then Frederick turned to Nosebleed and said, "Your turn." "My turn?" Nosebleed put his hands on his chest as if to say, "Who, me?" Frederick's own chest heaved. "You have to climb." He pointed at the rope, but his arm felt like it weighed 300 pounds, and it flopped back to his side. "The race is over," the professor said. Frederick shook his head. "That doesn't matter." He could hear that what he was saying sounded unreasonable, but he couldn't seem to do anything about it. The words were falling out of his mouth without his having any control over them. He gestured clumsily at Nosebleed. "He has to climb." The professor's right, Dash," Benjamin said. "We should go get changed. Don't you want to go swimming?" "I can't climb," Nosebleed said to Frederick. "What?" Frederick said, panting. "I can't climb," Nosebleed said each word loudly and slowly. He pointed with both hands at his nose. "If I exert myself, my nose will bleed." "What? If you exert yourself?" Frederick looked at the others. "Did you hear that?" he demanded. "He can't even climb. He can't even climb because he would exert himself." "Whatever, man, it's over," the professor said in a just drop it tone. He bent down and scooped up his book. "We didn't win," Frederick said, his voice cracking. He was getting shrill, and he knew that wasn't cool, but he couldn't let it go. "And whose fault is that?" Specs asked, accusation in his voice. Sometimes you win, Benjamin said, and sometimes you lose, and either way, you learn. We didn't lose either, Frederick said. We didn't even finish. I think not finishing qualifies as losing, the professor pointed out. I know this is disheartening, Benjamin said. His hands fluttered, adjusting his name badge. Frederick didn't feel disheartened. He felt like he was an incredibly tiny person, like the size of a flea, and a larger, evil person was holding a magnifying glass over him, directing a beam of sunlight to try and burn him up. And Frederick was shouting for help, but no one could understand him because he had tiny little flea voice. You were never even going to climb, Frederick said to Nosebleed. And you! He walked up to Specs and got in his face. The other boy stuck out his chin and didn't budge. You didn't really hold up a bank with a hand grenade and a parasol, did you? Specs asked with narrow eyes, studying Frederick like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. You were so slow, Frederick said. You were slower than a sloth? The professor suggested. Sloths lived in trees, Antbite said. The professor looked in surprise at Antbite and then said, Oh, yeah. So what? Frederick yelled, turning on Antbite and looming over him menacingly. Antbite didn't look menaced. So animals that live in trees are probably good climbers, the small boy shrugged. That's that's a really good point, Frederick said. His voice faltered and died, and he stared at a spot on the ground because he couldn't seem to meet anyone's eyes. It was important to Frederick that everyone in Group 13 and everyone in every other group and every human being on the planet understood that he was not the one who had let his team down. Yes, he was part of it. But it wasn't just him. Nosebleed couldn't climb at all. He wasn't even going to try, and Specs had lost them valuable time. If he had done better, they might not have gotten so far behind. But no one was going to remember that because Frederick had gone last and because he had fallen from the bell. Hey, Specs said with a pleased note in his voice. Frederick dragged his gaze up to look at the other boy, and something in the way one half of Specs' mouth curled up in a smile gave Frederick a bad feeling. No, a bad certainty about what was coming next. I've thought of a nickname for you, Specs said, squinting at Frederick. We can call you Dingaling. Frederick swallowed and looked at the ground again. None of the others said anything. The way you were swinging from that bell, Specs went on, and he let out a short fake laugh. It was hilarious. Ding, ding, ding. You look like something out of a cartoon. Wait a second, Specs, Benjamin began. Cut it out, the professor said to Specs. Specs spread his hands wide in a gesture of innocence and then turned on his heels and sauntered after the other groups. I think, Frederick said, more to himself than anyone else, I think I'm ready to go home. Not that home would be any better, home was terrible too. But at least at home there was no ropes to climb and no teammates to let down. The fact that he had thought this camp would be his big opportunity seemed ridiculous to him now, and he was mad at himself for being so stupid. You know you can't go home, Dash, Benjamin said in a gentle voice. You have to stay the whole weekend so that you can finish the program and be transformed. What? Said Frederick. He looked up. Nosebleed was shuffling his feet and watching Specs, who was heading for the sleeping cabins. The professor had crossed his arms and was tapping the dimple on his chin with one finger. Aunt Bite stood apart from the group. What program? Frederick asked. Transformed into what? Transformed. That sounded like something butterflies did, or Autobots, or people on plastic surgery reality shows. Well, Benjamin said, transformed into a person who's transformed into a better. Uh, what kind of camp is this? Frederick asked, a fresh wave of alarm building in him. Oh, it's a great camp, Benjamin said. It's a place to have fun, and it's a disciplinary camp, Aunt Bite said, interrupting Benjamin. Disciplinary camp? Frederick repeated. It's a place to have fun, Benjamin stressed, and be transformed at the same time. That's not. Frederick's voice trailed off. Disciplinary? That was like for punishing kids, wasn't it? Why were they at a camp for punishing kids? He looked then at Nosebleed, appreciating how very large the boy was. Not just heavy, but strong enough to slam Frederick to the ground. And the professor, he wasn't a little guy. An ant bite, the way his eyes were sizing Frederick up, the way he had kicked those rocks at the others, snap him in twain. Speck's voice echoed in Frederick's head. The boys in groups 1 through 5 were loping to the ropes for their turn at the climbing relay. They whooped and swung from them, making the climbing frame sway dangerously. These were bad kids, Frederick realized. Not like regular bad kids who didn't make their beds or eat their vegetables. These boys were bad like Lex Luthor or Magneto or Cruella de Vil. Only not her because she was a lady. So that was a bad example. Oh, Frederick said. Do you have a problem with that? Aunt Bite asked. What? No, Frederick said. I don't have a problem. I'm fine. I think disciplinary camps are great, and the people who go to them are great. Just great, he answered instinctively, not wanting to offend them. You had to know it was a disciplinary camp, the professor said. It was on the application. There was an application? Nosebleed asked, looking around. I didn't know there was an application. We need to get changed, Aunt Bite said, turning his eyes away from Frederick. If we're going swimming. He took off his specs. The others turned too. Even Benjamin started to head away. Come on, Dash, Benjamin cajoled, like he was trying to get a scared puppy to follow him. Let's go swimming, okay? Ah, so now it just hit Frederick what kind of camp he's in. And in Frederick's head, he can just walk away and leave. But everybody else thinks he's Dashel. And Dashel is there to be transformed. He's one of those bad boys that Frederick is talking about, describing. So, chapter 9 is the dead zone. Stay tuned. We will get back into that for next week's reading. Thanks for reading with me. Bye-bye.